So you want to get into high peaks hiking shape, but you don't have any mountains where you live? Well, you're in luck, because I've got a plan for you. We're up here on top of Mount Marcy, just waiting for the sun to rise. Day 2 of the Northville Placid Trail is in the books. Well, life doesn't get much better than this open ridge walk on Jay Mountain, and we're at the summit of Lower Wolfjaw, our 8th high peak of the day here on the Great Range Traverse. Well, it's 4:30 a.m., heading a big slide today, and it's -4 degrees here at the parking lot. Bushwhacking our way up Green Mountain, and I have to say, the trees are winning this fight today. Well, the sun is shining and the wind is whipping here up on Haystack. Next stop, Saddleback Cliffs. Cock-a-doodle-doo from the summit of Rooster Comb. Scarface might be the most underrated hike in the entire park. 60-mile-an-hour winds up on Hurricane. Very fitting, cruising up the Bald Rock slab here on Bald Mountain. Standing up here on the summit of Catamount Mountain, Iroquois, Mount Van Hovenberg, Skylight, Santanoni. You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast. Climbing mountains is different than any physical activity that I've ever experienced. The way your body has to work to climb these trails, the wear and tear that your body takes while doing it, it is drastically different than any other sport that I've ever partaken in. It's different from running. It's different from lifting weights in the gym. But with that said, we can still prepare our bodies and our minds to get ourselves in high peaks shape, even without mountains around us, so that when we do come to give the high peaks a go, we can set ourselves up for a successful, enjoyable day in the backcountry. Welcome to the 46 of 46 podcast. Today, I'm going to address a question that I get constantly. How do I stay in high peaks shape if I don't have any mountains around me to climb? And that is what I'm going to address today. I am a firm believer, and I've mentioned it plenty of times on past episodes, that climbing mountains, whether here in the ADK or elsewhere, is as much a mental game as it is physical. I've had dozens of very good, very in-shape people reach out to me over the years, from marathon runners to professional strength and conditioning coaches, all telling me the same thing. This hiking thing, it kicked my butt. It was so much harder than I expected. I have heard it many, many times over. And I've said countless times in casual conversation and here on the podcast that I would take someone who is currently a bit out of shape but is an experienced Adirondack hiker any day over someone who's never hiked before but they're in pretty good shape. And the reason being the mental side of the equation. When we know what to expect, we know how to pace ourselves in the mountains, we know what the trail looks like, how it feels on our feet, we know how it feels to climb 1,000 feet of elevation in under a mile and what that's like. Our mind eases and our bodies prepare accordingly, thus allowing our bodies to do the absolutely amazing things that our bodies are capable of doing. Whereas, someone who, let's say they're a marathon runner and they have no idea what the wear and tear is like on the legs and the knees when you're climbing a big slab or just hiking a mountain in general, on those seemingly never-ending stretches of elevation gain. These mountains, they just hit differently. And that's all it really comes down to. It's a different type of work. It's a kind of a unique blend of, like high-intensity interval training mixed with some steady state cardio in very different proportions that are constantly changing, sometimes for miles on end. You may have high intensity portions that last a mile straight, and then sometimes it might just be for 50 yards. But in the end, when you have the mental game on lock, you know what these mountains are, you can be sure that you will do okay, because that is a huge part of the equation for being successful. And there are plenty of ways to prepare for these mountains, and I'm going to get into it shortly. But again, knowing what you're going to encounter out there is more than half the battle, in my opinion. Whereas your physical stamina is just one smaller piece of the equation, in my opinion. Obviously important, but I do feel that the mental element is the most important. So with that said, if you've climbed Adirondack mountains before, it's been a good while, you're maybe a little nervous about whether you're in good enough shape before your next Adirondack trip, I feel that you can rest easy. You'll more than likely do just fine. Even if you go slower than you might usually go or you might want to go, I do feel if you know what to expect out there, you will still do a good job. It will be like riding a bicycle. Having the understanding of what these mountains are, what it feels like on your body when you're climbing, how to keep your head in the game, how your quads and calves feel when you're climbing up and ascending the mountain, the knees as you're descending. Ultimately, the mental element is just the most important thing. I just want to hammer that home because I've seen it time and time again from hikers, and I believe it to be the case. Now, if you've never experienced these mountains, but you're in great shape or you're even mediocre shape, it will definitely be a brand new experience. But don't get too full of yourself because, again, these mountains and mountains in general, they can humble a person real fast because, again, as I said, they just hit differently. There's something different about climbing mountains. So let's get into preparing you for the high peaks because I know what you're wondering. What is the best way to get into shape to climb the high peaks? Easy answer. Go climb smaller mountains first and progressively work your way up bigger and bigger in a linear fashion over time. This will build on that mental component that I just spoke about while simultaneously also building the muscles and strengthening the muscles that maybe your body forgot existed in your legs, your hips, your lower back, etc. But it will get your hiking muscles ready. And now I know what most of you are saying, but James, I don't have smaller mountains in my backyard like you do up in the ADK to climb. But that's okay. Because I'm going to get into what I have found to be the most successful way to get into high peak shape without having mountains to climb. But first, I do want to hammer home that I am, again, a firm believer. I preach it in person, in emails. I preach it to people. It is the whole premise of the Lake Placid Niner Hiking Challenge, really. Start small and work your way up. This is the number one way to get into high peak shape, both mentally and physically. And having the confidence when you go out into those bigger mountains is crucial. Now, when I say smaller mountains, I'm also talking about mountains that are, maybe 1 to 5 miles round trip with, 500 to 1,500 feet of elevation gain, kind of in that range, give or take. Those are great starting points. Those hills or mountains like that, you can pretty much find them anywhere within a couple-hour drive, no matter where you live. So there is always that option to help you get high peaks ready. But what I want to go into now in this episode is helping you get into high peak shape without mountains to give you the best chance at having a fun, a safe, and a successful day of hiking here in the Adirondacks when you do come up to climb those high peaks. So let's get you into high peaks shape. First, I'm going to break down the hiking experience and the main muscles being used out there in the woods so we're doing what we need to do in order to be successful. Now, a message to all my fellow men out there. I know we all want big, giant arms with muscular biceps and triceps, but unfortunately, they are not going to be a player in getting you to the top of the mountain. And now to all my ladies out there who train a lot of lower body exercises regularly, you are actually setting yourself up for success out there in the mountains by training those glutes and legs religiously. But again, to my dudes who focus solely on the upper body work and, they skip leg day, they never lift any heavy weight off the floor, they never get into the squat rack, it's time to change that if you want to get into high peak shape. So before I list out the main areas that we need to strengthen to get into high peak shape, I want you to pause and think back to the last time that you went for a big hike. What muscles were sore or, really tired the following day? Now, I'm willing to bet it was probably either your quads, your calves, your glutes, or your entire back. And maybe even your traps from carrying that backpack all day. These muscles, along with general cardiovascular improvement, aka your heart, are the main muscles that we need to focus on strengthening to get into high peak shape so you're ready to tackle those big, beautiful mountains. We want them stronger. We want them to have more stamina. These are your high peaks muscles. And again, climbing small mountains and working your way up is the best way to strengthen these while, also strengthening your mental game and confidence in those mountains. So I just want to reiterate that. I want to hammer that home. I do think that's the best way to get into shape. But when you don't have mountains at home, we can still get to work and we can still get you ready so that you will be set to climb those mountains. So we got your quads, your calves, your glutes, your back, and your heart. Yes, we cannot forget about that lovely muscle known as your heart. So these are the main muscles that we need to build up to get into high peak shape. With that said, however, there are certainly more muscles at play, and When it comes to training, our bodies need balance and we have to train the opposite muscles as well. So, you're obviously better off training everything, but those are the main muscles we want to focus on to give you the best foundation to have a successful day in the mountains. So if you don't have any mountains near you and you only have a local gym, what exercises can you do to train your quads, calves, glutes, back, and your heart? Well, there is one exercise that hits all of them and simultaneously trains that heart at the same time. And no, it is not running. Nope. Are you ready? Write this down. I'm going to give you the king of all exercises, the king of getting you in high peak shape. It's also the king of getting you to any other physical goal that you seek, whether it's fat loss or strength or muscles. Here it is. The squat. Any form of squat is king. Personally, I prefer the good old-fashioned barbell back squat because it is by far the most bang for your buck of any exercise that you could do. If you're short on time and let's say you only have 20 minutes at the gym, no problem. Just go right to the squat rack and just get the most bang for your buck. Keep adding some weight, just do as many sets as you can in those 20 minutes, squat, and then just go home. The reason that I like this exercise so much is because it mimics so many elements of life and it uses so many muscles to get us stronger. If we strengthen our backs, because, we're holding the weight on our backs when we squat, and then we can squat down with all that weight on our back and stand back up, we are truly using almost our entire body at the same time in unison. It's truly a beautiful thing, actually, and it is the ultimate way to build total strength. Strength is key. Now, this exercise builds our legs. Obviously, most people know squats as a leg exercise, but I dare say it's a full body exercise. Our legs do a lot of the work, not all of it, but a lot of the work. So building those quads and strengthening those legs will help you climb those slabs and the rocks and the high peaks with absolute ease. It'll also strengthen your knees and your joints too. We all know how much the descent off any mountain can be a true knee killer. Vitamin I, anyone? You all know. But for all you people with knee problems, Google squats fixed my knee pain, and you'll read countless testimonials of how bad knees were actually fixed from squatting. Despite what some, out-of-shape doctor who told you to stay off of it, they may say. Yeah, I guess I'm a little opinionated on this subject, but that's all right. I feel squats are king. Squats will heal those cranky knees. And plain and simple, I've found no exercise that comes remotely close to getting a person in shape for climbing mountains like the barbell squat. And no exercise that keeps a person in shape in general like a squat. It is the king of exercises. Now, on top of the obvious fact that strengthening your legs or getting stronger legs are good for hiking, it also strengthens your glutes and your lower back and your upper back. How many times have you been out on the trail all day and your lower back feels completely rocked from carrying that backpack all day? Maybe the following day it's beyond sore and you can't even really bend over. Our bodies just aren't used to carrying a backpack all day, let alone climbing mountains. And those backpacks are usually pretty heavy. So these are often some new stressors that we're adding into the mix too in order to get ourselves into the high peak shape. Strengthening these body parts will be very important and they will allow us to have a more enjoyable day on the trail. So that's why it's so important. Stronger glutes help us to propel ourselves up the mountain. A stronger back, both upper and lower, helps us to hold that loaded backpack all day long. Fortunately, the squat strengthens all of it because the weight is literally sitting on your back and you're squatting down and standing up, which forces all of those muscles that we just talked about to all get stronger, to all work in unison, just like our bodies have to do when we're out on the trail. And any real gym will have squat racks. It's actually my number one question when I call a gym. How many squat racks do you have? And I'm not talking about Smith machines, though if that's all you got, that'll do. But squatting is my number one exercise for you to focus on getting into high peak shape with. And when you don't have mountains to climb where you live, it is the perfect exercise so that when you do get out on the mountains, you will absolutely crush it. And if you want to spend a little money, you can even set up a home gym with a squat rack like I did many years ago, which has actually proven to be the absolute best investment in myself that I've ever made, if I'm being honest with you. Cannot recommend enough having a home gym. It is just the ultimate. And I want to continue with squats for just a little bit because if you load them up very heavy for, let's say, sets of 1 to 3 reps of, heavy weight, then maybe some moderate weight for sets of 5 to 8 reps or lighter sets for 10 to 12 reps, All these different rep schemes, they create different stimuluses, which are all important for climbing mountains, and they all help. They all help your body get ready. The heavy, high-intensity reps, they strengthen your muscles and your joints in kind of, a max effort manner. Whereas the lighter weight, the higher rep sets, they actually help work your heart rate and your cardiovascular system as well, which is so important for hiking. And it gets that burn in the muscles that you're going to feel while you're climbing up, that constant burn. So it's important to train that and to be ready for it. And one of the best things about squatting too is you're putting yourself in a tired state while having to do heavy work, which is, gets your entire body working together, working at the same time, your heart, your muscles, everything's working in unison to lift that weight up. And it's just truly the perfect recipe for getting your body ready for the mountains. Squats are king. Back squats, you got front squats, you got goblet squats, you got safety bar squats, you got Smith machine squats, dumbbell squats, back squats machines, you got the hack squat machine. There's tons of different squat machines as well. Tons of variations, all which can, be found on YouTube if you're not sure. And you can mix it all up, and it's good. You should mix it all up. But it's also the type of exercise that you can literally just keep it really simple, pick one of those variations and just hammer it for a long time. You'll get stronger and you'll strengthen those muscles that you seek to strengthen. And, squats are strengthening your entire body, the stronger quads and hamstrings. What does that do? It's going to take stress off your knees. Stronger glutes will take stress off of your lower back. A stronger lower back will also therefore make your lower back less sore the following day. A stronger back in general makes carrying a backpack all day a hell of a lot easier. And a stronger heart, can't forget about that. It sure makes climbing mountains and just living everyday life a heck of a lot easier. So let's get inside that squat rack. Hire someone if you need to learn proper technique, because similar to mountains and, needing proper gear and, knowledge of the trail, technique for doing these exercises is important, just like that knowledge of the trail is important. And YouTube is your friend. YouTube is your friend. Lots of information on there. You can also just send me an email or a message and I'll gladly guide you in the right direction. Obviously, if you can't tell from this episode, I'm pretty into this subject. And I'm 100% confident that squats and squats alone can get a person in unbelievable high peak shape. So when they go climb those mountains, they are beyond ready. But enough about squats. Let's continue. So while the squat can successfully build all 5 hiking muscles that I mentioned earlier, your quads, your calves, your glutes, your back, and your heart, so can the deadlift. The deadlift will strengthen your hamstrings, your quads, and your entire back. And for the same reasons and in the same rep schemes that I mentioned earlier with the squat, some heavy stuff, some moderate weight stuff, and some lighter stuff for lots of reps, the deadlift can provide that similar stimulus. And I'm sure some of you listening assume that my, get into high peak shape episode would tell you to just go for a run, but I truly believe that weights are far superior for getting a person into mountain climbing shape. Running is useful, absolutely, and I will get to that later, but in my experience, just nothing works like the squat and the deadlift for preparing your entire body and your heart for the high peaks, for climbing mountains. Nothing works like these two exercises. A heavy set of 10 deadlifts will have your glutes burning just like you're going to experience out in the mountains when you're climbing a long, steep section. Say you're climbing up Giant or Algonquin and those never-ending stretches of elevation gain, or you're on the Macomb slide or just, a million other places. Trust me, nothing works the body the same way, and you'll see for yourself if you incorporate this style of training into your regimen once you get into the mountains. And you will be glad that you did, because your stamina and your muscular strength will be through the roof. Trust me there. Deadlifts they just hit the hiking muscles. They strengthen your back so you can hold that backpack successfully. And heavy high rep sets will also train your heart to just perfectly mimic that burn. You're going to feel it, you're going to recognize it, and you'll train yourself and you'll be ready for it when you're on the trail. So like squats, I also believe that deadlifts alone in different rep schemes where they focus on strength can prepare a person for the high peaks if that's the only exercise you want to do. I feel just like with the squat, if you just deadlifted in different rep schemes, you would get into unbelievably good shape and ready for the high peaks. But I do give the slight edge to the squat, namely because instead of holding the weight like you do with the deadlift, the weight on a squat is just resting on your back. But both, are hands down number 1 and number 2, in my opinion, for getting any person stronger and, of course, getting into high peak shape. All right, so now I will get to running since I brought it up before. I do feel running is very beneficial for hiking. It's definitely not the most beneficial thing, but it has its place because there's a lot of benefit to the steady state cardiovascular training. And, running goes perfectly in line with hiking in that regard. So it does make sense to add it to your training program as well. However, with a caveat, I don't think you need to have it be your focus, and I don't think you have to do it often. Running does help strengthen your quads and, therefore your knees, right? But it especially trains your calves. Yes, your calves. We all know about those post-hike sore calves. Sometimes my calves are even sore after a day in the high peaks before I even get inside Stewart's for that post-high peaks hike milkshake. And calves are also super simple to train in general. You can just stand on the edge of a staircase and bang out 50 quick calf raises a few times a day, and you'll notice a dramatic decrease in the calf soreness experienced with hiking. They'll be a lot stronger and a lot more supple too, which helps, especially when you're in that position climbing up so much. But continuing with running, I personally feel that you never really need to run more than 1 to 3 miles to get in or to maintain the cardiovascular portion of the equation that we're looking for while being in high peak shape. Just a gentle jog for 1, 2, or 3 miles, or the occasional run a single mile as fast as you can is all you need. And I honestly feel you don't even need to do it more than 1 time a week, maybe twice if you really like running. But the weights and strength training will give you way more bang for your buck. But adding 1 day of running will definitely help keep you well-rounded and train some other muscles that will undoubtedly come into play when you're out scaling those mountains. So having the ability to run a few miles without stopping will mean your cardiovascular level of health is capable of having a good and successful day in the high peaks. So I do think that is important. It's a piece of the puzzle to be included for sure. All right, so now that I've talked about getting your muscles and getting the muscles primed and in shape for climbing the high peaks, I'm going to add one more element to your high peaks hiking shape training protocols for all of you writing this down. And it involves your backpack. Now, most of us, we never really wear a heavy backpack in life outside of hiking, and we certainly never wear a pack in general for hours on end. So if you are getting yourself primed and prepped for the high peaks, it's an easy element to kind of just forget, but it is important to be mindful of. Fortunately, if you're squatting and deadlifting, you'll already be strengthening your back, but I do believe that you also need the real thing here, and the real thing is actually very simple. There's currently a trend on social media and in the fitness world called rucking. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I absolutely despise this word, and I kind of despise anything that's trendy, quite frankly. But basically, rucking is simply loading up a heavy backpack and just walking. Nice and simple, nothing to overthink. Maybe you're outside, maybe you're on a stair stepper at the gym, which is good, it kind of mimics a mountain. Maybe you're just on a treadmill. You simply just load up a backpack as heavy as you want, and you just walk with it. However, for someone like myself, someone asks me, hey, do you go rucking, James? You like rucking? I just usually answer, oh, do you just mean hiking, just wearing a backpack and walking? Yeah, I do that all the time. Perhaps it's my punk rock nature to go against the grain, and I just can't admit to using the word rucking. But that's kind of a personal flaw, you could say. But at the same time, and for the sake of this episode, I do admit I absolutely see the benefit of rucking, particularly for the scope of this conversation. And therefore, I wanted to recommend it to people trying to get into high peak shape from afar because it's so simple. It is a simple thing to do. You likely already have a backpack, and you can load it up with your hiking gear. You could load it up with rocks, weights, doesn't matter. Throw a dumbbell in there, whatever. It's very easy, and I like simple. In my opinion, simple exercises are sustainable, and it's easy to do. And the backpack element, as I mentioned, it's so overlooked, but it's such an important part of the equation when you're out there hiking, and it's hard. Carrying a loaded pack all day, it's not easy. It's hard on your lower back. It's hard on your upper back, your shoulders, and your traps. So rucking is really a simple and very effective exercise to add to your regimen as you prime your body for the high peaks. And you can do it wherever you live, outside, inside, at the gym. I like simple. And again, simple is sustainable. So to me, really easy to do, quick to set up. You can just do it out your front door, and in seconds, you're out there rucking. And getting that backpack strength is actually very important. And I'm sure all of you have had that kind of backpack soreness the following day after a hike if you don't go very often. All right, so to recap this quick episode about getting into high peak shape, I feel the best way to get into high peaks hiking shape is by climbing smaller mountains first, as I mentioned, and working your way up one by one. And if you don't have mountains near you, I do feel the next best way is to strengthen the main muscles and joints that we use while hiking: our quads, calves, glutes, back, and our heart. And I feel the absolute king of all movements to train these muscles, along with improving your cardiovascular health, is the barbell back squat. Though I highly recommend doing any form of squatting, as long as you're continuing to try to build on that exercise. You want to either add weight each week, maybe you want to add reps each week with the same weight, or you want to add more sets. You just want to keep slowly adding weight and adding the overall total volume that you lifted week after week, because that is how your muscles will grow. That is how you will get stronger. So squatting is king. Second best, the deadlift, especially for some moderate to higher rep sets. I think it really mimics that feeling, that burn that you're getting in your legs and your glutes when you're climbing mountains. Next, to help with the calf training and more cardiovascular training, some light jogging, and finally, for that backpack strength, rucking. And now you have the foundation for keeping yourself in high peaks shape all year long, no matter where you live, and you can do this anywhere. Now, as someone who has lost 100 pounds and drastically reprogrammed his entire life, his entire mindset over the past decade, I speak from experience in this subject specifically. These exercises are effective for being prepared for the high peaks physically. In fact, I believe I've told a little bit of my story on episode 0, if I remember, on this very podcast. Squats and deadlifts are the main training factors that gave me the ability to climb these mountains successfully, and I have zero doubts about it. That is what got me ready. And when you have fun days in the mountains, your body's not dying getting to the top, well, look at that. You have a much more enjoyable day, and then you want to go again, and you want to go again, and then you're hooked, because a fun day in the mountains beats a terrible day in the mountain. You know, everyone has a different story, and everyone's going to have a different opinion on this subject, different physical fitness this and physical fitness that, but this is my opinion, and this is where I believe success will stem from for you. Strengthen the muscles needed to get you to the top of the mountain and back, build some mental grit by doing the work, and then reap the reward on the summit. It's that simple. It's truly amazing how much more enjoyable a day in the mountains and a day in the great outdoors in general is when you know that your body and your mind can handle wherever you're going. There's a freedom to it. And the high peaks are hard. I'm not going to say that they're not. It's tough out there. But when you can eliminate that whole wonder of, am I in good enough shape to make it to the summit? You will have a significantly more enjoyable day out in the backcountry. Eliminating risk and concern, it's very important, especially regarding our health. We already seek to eliminate risk by having proper gear and, having the 10 essentials with us. So when it comes to being in shape to make it to the top, it should not be any different. And I believe that we should all be honest with ourselves and honest with the shape that we're in. We should drop our egos, and we should climb mountains that are in our current wheelhouse in terms of how in shape we are, and then work our way up. Trust me, it's more enjoyable to climb a smaller mountain that you'll be able to make than try to get up a bigger mountain that you're just not ready for. That is just simply the way to go about it. Start small and work your way up, peak by peak, trip by trip. Ultimately, it's about having a good time and experiencing all that the great outdoors has to show you. It will teach you a lot about yourself if you let it, and the high peaks are no different. They'll humble you, they'll challenge you, they'll reward you for doing the work. And if you push yourself just a little bit, just outside that comfort zone, they're going to show you how powerful our minds and our bodies truly are. And that is a lesson that these mountains will teach you, and you can apply it to every aspect of your life. These mountains are magical, these mountains are mysterious, and they have so much to teach you about yourself. So I hope that all of you wondering how to get into high peak shape and how to stay in mountain climbing shape from afar can take this information to heart so that you can climb the high peaks with confidence, knowing that your legs, your lungs, and your heart can take you to the summit and back to your car. And remember, climbing mountains is even more mental than it is physical, and I think you'll be very pleased with what your body can do when your mind is ready for the task at hand. And that will do it for this week's episode of the 46 of 46 podcast. Thanks for listening, everyone. Check out 46of46.com for some more things that I offer. If you want to climb the high peaks, I have an ebook for sale that is a fantastic resource to give you all the information you need for a safe and successful trip through the Adirondack 46 high peaks. They are life-changing. If you like the show, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'd really appreciate it. Hit me up on social media at 46of46 podcast or at James Appleton 46, and I'll see you on the trails. Remember to always leave no trace, do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. See you in the squat rack, and then see you on the trails.